Good afternoon. My name is Jeff Bull. This is the Landing Commission meeting. Welcome people in the TV world and here. First on our agenda, we have Cindy Wilson here to talk about a World River Day event.
Yes.
Want to give us we have a lot of things today.
Yep.
If you could give us just a quick date, time.
Okay. The Wampanoag tribe has approached the Land Trust and the watershed to be included in part of River Day. They have been, over the past couple of years, doing different events where they've been traditionally burning out canoes and then launching them. And they've asked to have the launch of the canoe be the culmination of our River Day this time, and also to be included as part of that event, having some pop-up tents that have different cultural heritage, that show different drumming, dancing. If they would like to have a fire and do some cooking, if we could do that possibly in the parking lot where it would be safe. The exact location we can be flexible about, but they would like to be able to demonstrate how they would be cooking on an open fire. Apparently they've done this several other places with a lot of success, and they felt like it was an important opportunity to educate the community about it. The launch, the canoe would be burnt out. It starts with a big log that they then dig out, and over 10 days they've worked out with the Land Trust to be at Westport Woods, building it, burning it out, and they'll invite the community over to observe that and cook and eat some of the food during the lunch times there. Then they'll bring it over, and at 3 o'clock, when the tide has just switched and it is going back out, they would be launching, and we would pre-register up to 15 canoes. Some would be tribal members, some might be the Land Trust, might be the watershed, and some other people. They want to restrict the number, but they'd like to have some people follow the canoes down to Hicksbridge. We met with the kayak person at Jody at the kayak store, and he's on board, and he said that he wrote a letter in support of it, and he said that he'd be on board with arranging to bring the kayaks back up. The big canoe the tribe wants to handle getting back up to the landing, but all the canoes, they could shuttle them back up on their trailers if they would like, if people don't want a canoe back or kayak back up. And he was fine with us not renting he might rent during the day. If he does, he would stop at 2 so that he would provide safety boats to go with them. And he thought it sounded like a great idea. So he did write a letter of support.
Great.
The other vendors that we would have all last year was the first, we hadn't done River Day in a couple of years because of COVID. And then last year they hadn't had anything at the River Center. So I helped coordinate and helped run the Family Field Fun Day, which is pretty much an open house to the River Center. We would continue to have events, the stuff that we had there with face painting and greetings and merchandise, and we'd have the sand table open. We'd bring out the watershed model where they can see how pollution works. We'd have a pollinator thing. We'd have a scavenger hunt in the bog area, the constructed wetlands area. And different products like that. And we'd have several tents set up in the building. We'd like to block off the parking lot like we did last year for safety, so we don't have to worry about pedestrians being injured. The parking would be provided. We'd be providing parking up at the high school and the library with a shuttle bus that comes down and drops them off out front. That seemed to work very well last year, and I guess they had done that in the past. We would have stuff on both sides, since the native tribes would like to have individual pop-up tents. We would like to have each of the nonprofits have their own pop-up tents or their separate tables. So instead of us all being under one big tent, we're all in little tents. It's kind of like a village of interspersed Native American and Westport people. We'd also like to talk with the Historical Society about doing some things with Paul Cuffey and kind of really letting it highlight. Be a partnership. The Wampanoag tribe will probably design the t-shirt. They've asked that they be able to do that, and Deborah said that would be a wonderful idea. So we wouldn't have the t-shirt poster contest that they had in the past, but we would be honoring their request. So when they want it to be River Day, the Wampanoag experience, it's the same group that did the powwow, the Wampanoag experience over in Dartmouth last year that had like 2,000 people come. I don't think this would be quite as big of an event, though. I think that the event went very smoothly and very successfully, and they've done this in a couple other towns in Massachusetts within the past couple of years. And I think it would be a really neat opportunity and partnership.
Do you know where they did it in Dartmouth?
It was at, Round the Bend Farm? Yeah, and they built one of those structures there, and I think that one of the things they want to do is they want to demonstrate how they build it. I don't think they're building a whole new structure here, but they would be having somebody demonstrate how they built those structures as part of the experience too. So we would have some stuff on both sides of the river and intermixed. So we'd have, you know, some stuff on our side and some stuff over there. They want to have a storyteller. And we'd work on the layout with them and with the watershed. And once we knew how many different nonprofits wanted to be there, and if there's some other, we'd probably reach back out to some of the vendors that used to be at River Day to see if they wanted to come back, and just kind of make it a welcoming, all-inclusive opportunity for the community to get together and celebrate both Westport and the river and the Wampanoag tribe.
Great.
Did I answer all your questions on here, or do you want me to follow back up with you on some of them?
Just go through
Yep.
these. You said there were 2,000 people at the Dartmouth event?
There were, and we're not expecting that to be this big,
So what happens
if there are that many. We'd be doing a lot of shuttling back and forth from the different parking lots. I think between the library and the high school and the elementary school, I think we could end up shuttling, getting, you know, I think there's plenty of parking on that property. But I also don't know, I don't think they were all there at once. I think they're staggered. The event would be from 10 till 3. And so I think that, I'm sure that we would be able to accommodate it.
I would just ask that you consider having more than one shuttle.
Yes.
I've seen people wait a long
Okay.
time, and I guess part of my concern always is some reluctance to close off a public facility, even for a non-for-profit
Yeah.
thing.
It would-
So I would like to consider some way of keeping some of the landing open. I don't know.
It was more
if
of a
there's
safety concern in terms of
I
kids
understand.
running in and out,
Yeah,
and
but
you know, kids get away so quickly from people's hands.
Well, but some of that, I mean, you might also consider, I'm not saying you have to by any means, but you could have a monitor or a second policeman on the east
The
side,
far
in addition
side.
to the west. I mean, typically the policeman has stood on Drift Road
Yeah.
and, I don't know, managed when the van came in and sort of stood there most of the time.
What we did last year is we had cones
Mhm.
across the front, and
Right.
we had volunteers that were stationed there.
Mhm.
So it wasn't just unmanned, but it was blocked. My
Right.
one concern, if we were allowed parking on the east side, would be them coming in and going out the same way, and hopefully there wouldn't be a collision. It just seemed a little simpler for those 5 spaces to just encourage them to park up at the high school and be shuttled down. But we didn't have anything on that side of the building, so
Part of my concern is not people who are going to your event.
yeah.
It's someone else that just wants to use the river, and you happen to have an event going on. So how do we somehow create a way for them to, at a minimum, drop their boat off
Right.
and go somewhere else with their car,
Okay.
potentially, and where they do that? And so there's some accommodation for that possibility. It may not happen. I mean,
We
and
could-
it potentially could happen on the east or the west side.
Yeah, I think
The
the
problem
west side,
with
we're
the
gonna
west
also be
side-
having they're gonna be pulling in the nets to see the eels and the different things we bring out of that, and people will be walking from the parking lot over toward the river and back and forth and up and down that driveway.
Right.
So I
Well, I'd
think,
like us to be thinking
the east
about
side.
some way of some public accommodation.
okay.
I'm not saying I don't
I think
we
the
can
east
figure
side
that
might be
right now.
working. We could have somebody stationed there
If
that could
there's-
direct traffic if there was
There's
a
also
problem.
obviously the need to allow the property owner to the east to get in and out.
Yeah.
So,
Last
and
year,
I would think with the volunteers, it would be good if it was perhaps just 2 people and they were really trained.
yes.
I have spoken with Jody who offered a follow-up boat.
Okay, yeah.
My understanding from him is they were just going to kayak down behind the canoes. And I'm not sure.
We spoke to them on Saturday.
Not
When
sure.
did you talk
Yeah.
to him? You did?
I've spoken with, and I
Okay.
said, I'm not sure that depending on who's in these canoes, because you're only going to have canoes, is that correct?
I don't think we'd specified that yet.
Kayaks or SUPs, and you're going to limit it to
My thought would be kayak, it would be canoes or kayaks. And
15 people?
I
Or
think that
15
they-
boats?
the tribe, I believe, I haven't been part of the tribe conversations yet. Deborah's
Okay.
been doing that. I believe their request was to allow 15 boats.
For the tribe?
Up to 15 boats to accommodate the tribes and the land trust and people that want to pre-register.
Okay, well, that would be something, there have been issues in past river days with problems with the harbor master and the requirement potentially to provide rescue services.
Okay.
And so I think that really needs to be thought through
Okay.
in terms of really are you going to limit it? On the other hand, just on a regular Saturday, we don't provide a lot of those kinds of services.
Right.
It's just that now, because you're an organized event,
Right.
somebody's going to be liable.
Exactly.
And it needs to be named in your insurance policy.
Yeah.
So something you need to be figuring out, and I don't do insurance,
Okay.
is who's insured. Is it the watershed? Is it the Wampanoag people?
Okay.
Is it who needs to be named in the insurance policy?
Okay.
And I would expect that people at the watershed and the land trust, this is what they do.
Exactly.
And-
And everyone
and
wants
maybe-
everyone to be safe,
maybe
and
the
everyone
one-
wants to cover themselves. So,
Right, so-
that sounds very reasonable. And seems to
some
make a lot of
that
sense.
Might be that might or might not be that it's a good idea to have a Boston whaler there with a little outboard on it. I don't know.
Yeah.
Depends some on the age of the people. I know if it's just, canoes are pretty safe. It's a
Yeah.
pretty safe river. More the issue, which once happened on the other branches, and luckily it's high tide, is that somebody stroked and they couldn't get to them
Yeah.
because of the tides. And it takes a while, and so I'm not sure the fire department can
Yeah.
fire up their jet skis quickly.
Okay.
So
We'll think through that scenario.
that needs to be thought through a little
Yep.
bit.
Safety is obviously a high priority.
So you can have a sign-up limit, and then again, if someone wanted to put their own boat in the water, where would they end up parking themselves and their?
The thought was if they pre-registered, that they would come drop their boat off prior to 9:30.
Yeah, not one of your.
Pardon me?
If Joe, not part of your event,
Right.
shows up at 10 o'clock and wants to use the river,
They could
does he
access it
park
from the
on
far
Brook
side.
Road and slide it down the hill there?
Yes, I believe so.
Does he temporarily park it and carry it through the parking lot on the east side? And then what does he have to do with his car?
Yeah.
That's something for this commission to consider.
I think that we would be encouraging people to probably drop it off from Drift Road side and then go park up at the high school and get shuttled back down to it.
What do people think about that as far as?
Or we could also, if we
Parking
had,
to the
if we
public.
had the east side open, those 5 or 6 slots, they could do that. I don't know whether you can get something with the trailer in there and turn it around in that space.
Typically not trail, it's almost
Okay.
always just,
Back of the
Park up.
truck or park
Yeah.
out. And
yeah.
I mean, I think if we kept those 5 or 6 spaces open, that they
Yeah.
could have it as an option, if they were comfortable with that. The ones that would be following, we were going to, since they were pre-registering, request that they come drop it off prior to us closing down the parking lot.
There's
at
also
9:30 in the morning.
parking spaces in front of the kayak shop. If Jody's going to be involved in this,
Mm-hmm.
conceivably he could move some of his vehicles that he's not using somewhere else.
Yep,
And that similarly, I would expect the watershed truck not to be there and the watershed
Yeah.
people to be parking elsewhere.
yep, yep.
So are you expecting to have, would you like to have a fire just on the ground in the parking lot?
I think so. I think they just typically build their own little fire pit out of stones or whatever, that, however, it's a traditional fire, and then they would just have an open fire that they would be cooking on. And we thought that the safest and easiest place to clean that up would be in the parking lot. And then we would, obviously have a safety distance around it.
Would you put shells down or something that could then be picked up so we don't
Yeah, we
end
could
up with
do-
a black spot
Yeah.
for the next 6 months?
Yep, we can easily do that. Yeah, I mean, very easy to, do that, or to move some around and
I don't know.
move some gravel around and put it back on.
Right, I know a lot of the gravel.
Over a load of gravel, yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of the gravel has been plowed over onto near the porta-john.
Yep.
And so conceivably you could just shovel some of that back where
Yeah.
it's kind of gone bare or something. I mean,
Our thought would be that you wouldn't be able to tell it had been there.
That's our hope.
Yep.
Yeah. And it will be a very high tide that day. It's a moon tide,
Yep.
which means that the flat section, which I will call south of the East Slipway,
Yep.
that will be mushy.
Mushy. Okay.
And just north of the Slipway will be mushy.
Yep.
So are you expecting to do things there?
We
or
were not
in the
particularly, we
parking
were
lot?
thinking that they could maybe be storing the boats that are going to follow them further up, kind of up as it goes up to that berm, so they don't get washed away. If the tide comes in, they don't float away. We would not prevent people from walking down there,
Yeah.
but we would have tents set up around the perimeter of the parking lot and in front of the building, and the building would be open. And so people would kind of come down the road, there'd be stuff on that side, and then people would come down the road, there would be things in front to welcome into the River Center. They'd go then do stuff on the first floor of the River Center, exit out the back. There'd be a mix of watershed and Native American and other nonprofit stuff interspersed around out there with some activities and possibly some crafts that are river related or different things. And then some merchandise tables. I think the merchandise table might be at the front. We probably also, we want to make sure that we, at a minimum, provide water so that we don't have anyone getting dehydrated or anything like that. So we would probably be providing water for sale for $1, I think is what they have done in the past. And then we might provide some food since it's from 2 to 3. You don't want to have people not being able to have access to the food. So I guess in the past they used to do like sandwich rolls, and they would sell those for like $1 or something like that, and some chips and some.
Yeah. Have you viewed our form?
I have not seen it.
The
I'm
form.
sure Deborah has seen it.
There's a form,
Okay.
and I'm not a Board of Health person,
Yep.
but I would expect that you need to talk to the Board of Health about the detail of
Yeah.
the food, particularly
Exactly.
if you're going to be cooking, and that might be part of your insurance policy.
Yep.
I don't know how all that works, and I don't want to get into the detail of
And I think
your-
that the tribe since the tribe's going to be cooking over there and serving food when, providing food for the 10 days they're there, that's something that will already be on their radar. With ours, I was more, I used to run an event that had like 100 and something booths at our children's school in North Carolina for 13 years. And so we'd have all sorts of different booths. I like the logistics layout, but I'm more concerned with making sure we have the
Yeah.
water.
How do you expect them to move the food? Is that they can move it across the river or back a vehicle in?
The food,
If they're gonna, is it really just gonna be sort of pretend cooking, but most of the food's gonna be pre-cooked? and
I don't think they're
it's gonna be
serving
sold?
everyone. I think they're more demonstrating how it's done.
So they're not gonna be needing to take large bins of stainless steel bins?
No.
And carry
I would think that
those
they bring
around
stuff
on
in
the
a,
bridge?
no, I would think that they might, pre-stage stuff
I would say you should have them
in
talk to the Board
coolers.
of Health.
Yeah, I'll make sure
Have
that
them do
they
that, because
they know what they're
yeah,
doing.
they know.
I mean,
I
just
would,
the process.
I would imagine they might have some stuff pre-staged in coolers in the downstairs of the watershed somewhere, or upstairs in the kitchen of the watershed, if they need it, but,
So you don't expect vehicles have to come in, load up the back of a pickup
No.
truck and drive large amounts of food that has just been cooked?
Nope.
And then take it?
No, the parking lot would be closed off to traffic from 10 until 3.
Right.
Or until 4, till we get it cleaned up. Realistically, if it launches at 3, we're cleaning up the parking lot until 3:30 or 4, though it cleaned up pretty quickly last year. And we'll be having a similar setup around the
Right.
parking lot area.
Something I added to Deborah's list at the bottom was when and how will a rain date be communicated to the public?
Our thought was that we, and I think that she was waiting to confirm this with the tribe, but our thought was that we would be doing it on Sunday, because people that typically have the weekend
How are
free.
you going to communicate that it's not out Saturday?
By email and posting on Facebook and social media and Instagram and a sign, and
When do you think that decision will be made?
Typically, when I used to do this for the event that we had at the school, we would make a call Friday afternoon, so people had enough time to know to change their
Right,
plans.
because
But we would know the weather.
Wampanoag people and stuff, so that would be
Yeah.
Friday afternoon.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then we would communicate it as many different places as we can and have a big signage there, so if people drive by. We would probably try not to cancel it unless it's absolutely pouring
Right.
down rain, but if it's a thundering and lightning storm, you know, if it's gonna be a miserable experience, we would probably postpone it, but if
Right.
if we can pull it off, we'll pull it off.
How big is this machine? Am I saying that correctly? Machine?
Yep, I believe that I don't know exactly. This is an example of one that they did up in, that I think was a picture from the Sudbury one, where they were thinking when we were looking at the lot, because they would like to have it on display. This is, pardon the fact that it's through the screen from upstairs, but we were thinking a good place to see if it would fit would be on this jutting of land in the constructed wetlands behind the fence near the parking lot,
I can't see what.
on its side, so it's kind of right here.
So this looks to me.
I think that area is about,
I was going to say a 20-foot boat.
yep,
I
exactly.
think it depends on how.
And I
long
think
the log
I think that land bubble in between the constructed wetlands is about 20 feet long.
Oh, and so you're thinking of putting it on the peninsula?
Yeah, the peninsula.
Ah,
On its side, so it doesn't fill up with water. We would talk to them to confirm that this would work, but, because the tribe would have the ultimate say. But our thought was we would put it on that peninsula on its side, so it doesn't fill up with water, with the opening facing the river, so people can come look in it, and there'd be signage there that explains what it is, that the tribe would approve and help us create.
huh. You could always like drill a hole in it. Most boats have drain plugs.
Well, I think that when I was reading about them, they also, well, we could see if they could do drain plugs.
Whatever,
Because they did
also.
also say that they, at some point, they'd like to use all these canoes that they're creating in these different organizations to have a tribal gathering on the
Yeah.
waterways like they used to in olden times, because I guess this was their summering lands.
Okay, so they would like it to be there after the event. I'm assuming they would secure it somehow. I mean, I doubt that someone would carry it away, but
Right.
you never know. And
And I think if it was on that peninsula, fenced off from the driveway and away from the river, that's probably a fairly safe, out-of-the-way place for it to be.
And
Yeah.
where
Where
the
it
possibility of security cameras and things, so it would be less
Exactly,
likely
and I
that
think
they-
that it would be a well-publicized area that you can, a very identifiable place, and we haven't proposed that place to them particularly, but I think that would
I
work.
mean, it probably could. I don't think. I mean, just looking at this and from memory, that peninsula is a little bit wider than a car, maybe 2
Yeah.
feet wider.
And I
So
think the boat's supposed to just be about people width.
So I don't know if people would actually be able to walk around it, but you might be able to put it on one side of the peninsula. And
Yeah.
So signage would be on the canoe itself.
Either on the canoe or at the very end.
Okay. Do people have any questions about that? And how about, would there be a release of responsibility for the canoe should the canoe
I'm sure that we would do that.
disappear or
Yep,
get burned or,
yep, I'm sure there
I
is.
mean, spray painted? I mean, we have seen remarkably little vandalism down there,
Yeah,
but
I'm sure that we can work that out with them. I was reading a couple other places that they, after it was on display, a couple places they sank it and put rocks in it so that they can then take the rocks out and raise it again. That's one way that they store it, but they'd asked to be able to store it so people could see it. So whether that's what they ultimately want to do, if they want to ultimately keep this one somewhere where people can see it, I think we'll cross that bridge. But I think for the summer, at least, they'd like to have it on display.
I'm thinking that like signs bigger than what I would call a yard sign, twice as big as those.
I would imagine, yeah, maybe. So if this is the peninsula and the canoes here with
Are
this
we
side.
aware of the sign that's on the watershed, that's on the constructed wetland? I would think that we might want to.
Is that the one we see in the right hand?
Yeah, the one that's there.
Yeah.
That the signage would be limited to that
Size.
which is quite a bit bigger than a yard sign.
Yeah, I would think that it might be down here or angled maybe that way or angled this way so that people can walk up and see it without having to stand in the parking lot, somewhere where they can see it without having to go all the way out, and so that you see that there's some signage.
Okay, and we would try to get the highway department to mow that space before that event.
Yeah.
Mow it down low, because it's going to be difficult for them to mow it afterward.
Right.
They'll probably.
It's such a small area, if for some reason that didn't happen, I'm sure we could weed whack it or something like that, but
No, I mean for the rest of the summer.
for the rest of the summer, yeah.
That's my concern.
Okay,
The rest of the
I
summer.
think that makes a lot of sense.
Because they are short-staffed, and asking them to come in there with weed whackers and a
Yeah.
push mower might
I think that would be
be
great.
unlikely.
Yeah, I think that would be fine. I don't see a problem with that.
I think that's a good location for it.
I think it would work well.
Yeah.
I think that sort of takes care of most of the questions I have. Typically, we have appreciated a heads up ahead of time
Uh-huh.
about when you're thinking about having it, so we can sort of save the date.
Yep.
We have not received anything else for those 2 days.
Okay.
But we really have to wait till you get the form
Okay.
signed off.
Okay.
That takes.
It had taken a while for the tribal group to firm up when they were
We have
available.
another meeting in a month, but
Okay.
I think, are people comfortable penciling them in for this event for that weekend?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Well, there you go.
Wonderful. And I'm sure Deborah will get the form filled out and cross all our i's and dot all our
Oh.
dot all our t's and cross all our i's.
Wait till you see the form.
Now, do I pick up the form, or does it get sent to us, or do we access it online?
I think it's available.
I think it's on the website. You can print it. It's 2 pages. Well, it's front and back.
Okay, front and back.
Yeah.
And if we have trouble finding it, we can reach out and figure out where it is.
Yes.
And is it something that the land trust and the watershed and the tribe all need to fill out, or just the
I think
watershed?
It's probably going to be. I mean, you need to be thinking with the land trust about your liability and whose event is this,
Okay.
and what's your relationship with the Wampanoags. I expect it would be one form for the whole thing,
Okay.
but
I would imagine it would be the watershed, because I
But
think,
you're sponsoring the event.
Yeah, we're sponsoring the event.
yeah. So
and I'm sure that they've had to fill it out for all the other river days that they've had, so I'm sure that they're very familiar with it.
yeah.
Okay.
One thing I was thinking, since it's gonna be a super high tide and 3.3 is substantial, I wonder if it might not be wise to put like some snow stakes
Yeah.
along the edge of the river, just so people don't, they're walking through the water, you know, mucking around there, and all of a sudden they end up in the river instead. You know, they go right over the stones.
Oh, you mean you think that because it's mushy, they're more likely to fall
Not only
forward?
not
Yeah,
only
shake
mushy,
it
but the whole wall is buried, so that you're gonna have to look carefully. You can easily drive a boat right over the top of that wall,
Right.
or fall
Okay.
off the wall.
Right.
I don't know.
So in other words,
We
we'd
can-
like you to be thinking about
Marking
I
off,
mean, it would be
putting
awful
some
to
safety
put
things.
orange tape, but
Yeah, I'm just thinking a few like the driveway stakes that you use for
Yeah.
those days when we used to get snow.
Yeah, I think most people will be in the parking lot and right around the area, and then on the other side.
yeah, I mean people.
Right. Well, even
Is
on
it
the
on the other side?
the
Okay.
water is going to come up way.
And so
above
we can monitor that,
circle.
and it might be good even to put marks where the high tide will come up to.
I was
And so
thinking
if
you
they
might wanna
ask
do
why
that.
they want to do that,
If you
why
go
are they
the-
there? Well,
yeah.
we're just showing you where the high tide's going to come up
Well,
to.
if you go the day beforehand,
Yeah,
And watch and see what.
market that day.
yeah,
at
I think
high
that would be
tide.
fun, and an educational thing, if nothing else.
Something that I forget over and over again is how many hours above Hicks Bridge high tide is the head.
Yep. And
I've said 2 hours, but that would actually be a good thing for the watershed to know. And since they're there a
I
lot,
think
Yeah.
Jody knows that.
yeah, I think that that's one of the things that they looked at, why they picked the timing of it, because that's after the tide has switched, so they'll be going out with the tide.
you might just, since you've got a lot of interns and stuff, it might be just a good thing to sort of map that for a few days
Yep.
next week.
Yeah.
Because that
I
would
think
be
they
useful for
monitor
me
it
to
fairly
know.
fairly
So,
regularly.
Yeah,
I think it's just about 2 hours.
yeah.
Yeah.
This meeting tonight because I sent them a letter about the point, and they said, we want you to come to our meeting, and I was like, okay. So it has occurred to me that we should potentially get them involved in that discussion. I believe Richie was going to speak with he was going to speak with
Couple members
the
of the
past, and I'm forgetting his name right now,
Hart,
Mr. Hart, who was around when
Stafford.
that was sort of built. And did Stafford remember anything? And he does not.
Oh, he doesn't.
And there's nothing in our files about it because it's not something in our files. So that's something I will make Jim and the select board aware of, that because really this whole thing is theirs legally. We're just helping out.
Right.
And
So maybe they should ask one of their clerks to do some research to see what's available. The select board.
right.
It's their staff, so,
Mhm.
yeah, because we're gonna need to know.
Make some kind of deal. I mean, to me, they've been doing it. I expect I mean, they're a public organization. We could certainly give them free parking when they're having events or something. So many free passes a year, I don't know. And this kind of thing goes on all over town. I mean, the path to
Very critical, this
the
project.
path to
Yes.
Cherry and Webb Beach goes on private land, and it cannot realistically go on public land. It would be really difficult to walk. I mean, it's a difficult walk up and down that dune anyhow. If you had to actually walk through the mosquito woods up and down that sand dune, for a lot of people,
Is that the beginning of it that's on private property? Or the sort of
no,
middle?
it's about halfway up the incline.
The first incline?
And
Yeah.
then basically, you know, where those benches are at the top, and basically what I'll call the summit. Oops. You wanted a letter of support, item 3, a request for the climate resilience engagement.
Yes, I had a request to ask the Land Commission if they would be willing to write a letter of support for, they want to hire, I believe it's a part-time person to kind of spearhead their mission, and organize their mission and fortify their mission to address sea level rise in Westport. And they want to have some public meetings with public input about what should we prioritize.
And they want to hire with what money?
A grant the grant that they're asking for us to write a letter of support for.
I'm sure
That
the
would-
public will be interested in that issue.
The grant money would be funding this position, as well as some outreach posters and information, you know, whatever form they choose.
I have to admit total ignorance on the climate resilience engagement. Can you enlighten me as to what this
Well,
is?
what are the impacts going to be to Westport of sea level rise that we already see at the
Yeah.
head landing and other landings? And what else is there? I mean,
Yeah.
East Beach Road.
The town,
And this is a group?
It's a town committee.
town
yeah.
committee, the town did a lot of research, and I went to the meetings at the library about 4 years ago about how much trouble are we in, and how do we set priorities? Are the bridges a priority? Is property a priority? And what do we do about the fact that this is going to happen? And basically those meetings happened, a lot of professional people came. There are a lot of parts of town, particularly way north in town, interestingly, that are really threatened. More than south in town, interestingly, although the tax base is threatened south of town. And things like the bridges won't work. So what do you do about ambulance services? You know, so basically those meetings happened, a lot of that got mapped, and not much has happened since. So the town would be wise to start planning for the reality of that and thinking about its priorities. So I think this is an attempt to not kick the can down the road.
And part of the grant application was that if they can show community support, it points towards their grant
Right.
being funded. And the funding is through Executive Office of the Energy and Environmental Affairs.
So it's state money.
Yeah, which is probably federal money. It came to the state,
Mhm.
my guess is. The last decent storm we had, when we finally had our little stream running, the water was 3 inches from crossing Old County Road at the bridge.
Hmm.
It was right up there. And that was no named tropical storm or anything. That was
Right.
just a fair amount of rain. It wasn't any 7 inches or anything, you know. I think it was about 4 or 5 inches, and winds that were in the right direction to mound the water.
And there's going to be some accommodation, and it makes sense to start talking about priorities now so that people will start being serious about this.
And as all reconstruction jobs go on to, well, wait a minute, maybe we better wait on that one because we need to raise it or something rather than going through and repaving something that's
Right.
going to be flooded out. And,
Yeah, I raised some of these issues when we rebuilt the stone walls at the landing, and I said, since we're taking them all down anyhow, how about putting some cement blocks down at the base and bring everything up a couple of feet? Because we're going to need, the grass is already awash at high tide. This is going to be an issue. Interestingly, we couldn't even raise the parking lot by law because then you're displacing water onto the neighbors, like the yellow house, and so you have to compensate them for that. So there are some complications and decisions to be made about. Oops.
So they want a letter of support.
yes. So,
I will entertain a motion supporting the writing of a letter of support.
I
Second.
recommend. Okay.
All in favor of
Aye.
aye? Who would like to write the letter?
I already wrote one, so it should be out of a different form. I mean, you know, someone different perspective.
Well, I could write a very brief letter and just sign it.
The best thing is that we will support their activities. I sent you that
Yeah.
piece, I think. You know, support their activities, endorse it, and, you know, hope that they get the money so that we can address
Right.
this.
Okay,
Thank you.
moving right along to number 4, Point Landing, wheel stops and paving.
Just a reminder, that letter goes to Michael Burris, the new town planner.
I'll
and-
just look back at your email.
Okay.
I won't remember
Okay.
between now and then,
Okay.
whatever you tell me.
And it's due
verbally.
February 28th,
Yes.
or earlier.
Okay. Okay. Folks, I sent you copies of this and the Sean version. Here, I'll give you a color one, because I have the color one in my head. So this basically, and I've sent a list of things which was somewhat changed and updated from the list I sent you. Items 6 and 7 were transposed. About what we think should happen down there. Reducing the gravel driveway in front of the Paquachuk, which is somewhat reflected by where I've drawn these parking spaces. Number 2 would be to, from Sean's plan, put, you know, if in fact we're required to have 2 handicap spots, that for this area in general, that one be moved over to the mud dock where I show it, and another one be over where Sean had originally drawn it. This also happened in the design of the head landing, where both handicap spots were right in front of the ramp to the watershed building. And I said, what if a handicapped person wants to use the picnic bench? Why don't we move one over there? And I think that's worked well. Also, the reality is that oftentimes someone will pull in, just unload quickly in a handicapped spot. in the move. So I think this is a better use of that space over at the mud dock, myself. But that decision again is up to the select board, because that part of the whole region is theirs and not ours, which is a point I expect to make with them somewhat over and over again. And I've drawn the triangle with a pretty hard line which shows blue or purple on Brian's copy, but not on yours. But you can see that on that drawing, that hard boundary of the landing.
The diagonal, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
That the fire department had said that a smaller radius than Sean had drawn was just fine. And I guess people keep talking about, well, the water truck has to get around. And my sense is, and what I've said in the letter to Jim, is the water truck is there. I mean, I don't feel like it's okay to compromise parking for the public 24/7 just so the water truck has an easy time getting around when it needs to be there, or perhaps they can hire a smaller water truck. I mean, a friend of mine who lives on Cherry and Webb has a water truck delivered to his house. He's got no turnaround. He's got a narrow, messy driveway, and they pull up, and I guess it's just like getting oil delivered.
I would tend to think that they probably pull straight, come around halfway around the circle, and then pull straight, and then back down the dock there, because they're probably servicing more than one boat when they come in.
I'm thinking it's mostly for Haynes and for the lobster people. I hadn't thought about the boats, but I don't know. But it's not my problem. Get a smaller truck, it seems.
Well, if it's for the oyster place, they come around the circle and then they just back down in. So
whatever. I don't feel like we need to make a huge accommodation for an enormous truck to come through there.
Yeah.
It seems like they could hire a smaller
if
truck.
this meets highway standard, I mean, or whatever it was, I mean, this was Westport Point, you know?
Well, I think, like a lot of things, the highway standards have changed.
Yeah,
It used to be
right.
horse and buggy or
yeah.
something.
Is it okay for fire trucks?
The fire
If
department
they
said
said
okay.
fine.
They don't need to get their huge ladder truck down there. And they visited.
Yeah.
I mean, not recently, but when they
I
were.
would think if the oyster place was on fire, they might want to use that water truck,
I don't
ladder
know.
truck.
I don't
They
know.
might want to extend the ladder out over the water to save somebody. Which has been done.
So, we have number 5 on this was the idea of extending the existing paving. So the dotted line you see on your drawing is what the 4 of us measured as where the paving currently is. So my sense is the paving, the parking spaces along Haynes' property are exactly where Sean drew them. I've just changed them a little bit to squeeze in another extra space. And so it seems to me that certainly the paving would need to be extended to the front of those parking spaces, and similarly to the front of the ones where the Paquachuk are. Item 6, the Landing Commission is undecided about striping and uninformed about the legal ticketing impact. And I note that Sean's drawing showed 15-foot spots by the Paquachuk and 20-foot spots along the east boundary. Because we've heard that there's boats, trailers there parked in 3 longer ones, with the idea potentially either the people could park each other in, or that maybe trailers would figure out that was the place to park. But maybe that's just not a good idea because it creates confusion too. I also don't know what happens legally as soon as you start striping things. I spoke shortly with Jim Hartnett about the striping, and he said, as he has said at some of these task force meetings, that he thought that if you stripe it, you lose parking spaces. my experience has been the opposite.
Yeah.
And I've taken plenty of photos of the landing as it is now, where cars and trucks are parked
3/4 of a car apart.
2 to 5 feet apart.
Yeah.
And if there are wheel stops or stripes or both, people tend to go there. And I've got pictures of the head landing. So
That's my experience.
he
too,
keeps
is-
saying that, but I don't get it. And because I, again, would not stripe, because he says, well, people are parking each other in if you have stripes and you can't do that. And I said, well, we're not going to, we have no responsibility over the bridge abutment. And I encourage the select board, because that one's on them, to have an ongoing agreement with the Oyster people that their people park each other in there, so that we don't lose parking spaces there, because that's what they've done in the past. We are considering, so I don't know whether we need striping and headstones. I mean, I'm
Did
not.
you see that picture I sent you? How they do it in Australia?
I did see that, yes, and I thought that was sort of cute, but that's how they do it in Australia, and I'm not sure Americans would get that, and I don't know what the expense would be.
I'm American and I got it.
Yeah, but look at who you are compared to some people who were hot to go get a beer and an oyster.
Yeah, but there's in that had headstones too. Nice little granite ones, very low profile, so they didn't rip off the
Yep.
fenders or whatever you call that, undercarriage
Oh,
of the
right.
under plastic of the new cars.
Yeah.
But they certainly delineated it. From that picture, I took it from the side to kind of show what the whole parking lot looked like. It just didn't look like some kind of a geometric pattern out there,
Right.
you know? I mean, it's just little,
Dots.
like 4 dots per parking space. Each line was just 4 dots of something that they just put into the pavement.
And they were
must
slightly
be-
raised.
Just slightly. Yep,
So that-
just slightly. Not enough that they'd even trip you if you walked on them. They're very slightly
Right,
raised.
yeah, and I don't know what a snowplow would do to them. It'll
Yeah,
be an
I thought
issue
about
of
that, yeah,
expense
that
too,
might
and
be.
maybe you just don't spray paint everything.
I was going to say spray paint. When I was looking at that, I go, you know what? Spray painting those dots might be a better idea. And this doesn't make it look like such a.
Right.
But
So
I'm not going to look at it much.
They do use some kind of a thing in the highways
and I'm amazed they're still
That-
there.
Yeah.
that snowplows don't seem to have a problem with.
It's amazing those
I
things
don't
are
know
still
what they
there.
call them. I'm
Right.
Yeah,
struggling
and
here.
the reflectors also.
Yeah.
Reflectors, so if you know you're going the wrong way down the highway.
Right.
And they probably stand up 2 inches. You know.
Is it that much?
I don't know, but I'm
You
amazed
feel
those
it when
things
you
are
drive
still
over
there.
it. You feel it. Yeah.
And then finally, the Landing Commission's considering attractive rail fencing along the east border and maybe the north parking lots. As I was drawing this and spending hours looking at this, I think certainly we would should consider a rail fence on the lot line at the Haynes property. Consider it, not necessarily do it, just consider it once we've paved and put head markers in.
I really think we should do something there. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure, since it wouldn't even be on the boundary line, what the need would be, unless it's an aesthetic thing, to do it along the north boundary, along the north parking spaces, because we wouldn't want to put it right on the boundary line, because
Right. High hurdles out of the Packwachuck. Yeah, that wouldn't work.
So, are we okay in general with this? This would obviously have to go for engineering. Where this handicap spot is here may be unbuildable because the slope there,
It's so close, you'd need to have retaining there, yeah,
I don't know.
in the house that's there is shown, so it would be, it's gas meters there and things.
So we might lose that one, might have to just move one
Yeah.
north.
Yeah, it levels out pretty quickly, but I think that
So
one
yeah,
would be.
this would probably have to go before the planning board and any other thoughts about this?
Yeah, have you shown it to the planner?
No. No.
So you're taking this to them this evening?
I think they're going to spend almost no time on this at all. This is mostly going to be a short discussion and say we need, for one, we need an active liaison from the select board to the landing commission. We have had a selectman who supposedly do that, but we haven't seen him in our meetings. And he has to be updated on things. And he is no longer going to be a selectman in about a month. So I think it would be wise, because the other issue that really needs some attention in town is what is that before my time, Carl Tripp insisted, who had been the chair of the Landing Commission for decades, his understanding was the Landing Commission was only responsible for properties that were deeded to the Landing Commission, which are the four we sort of take care of. Lucy Tabbitt, who had been our secretary, found something in the bylaws that said that we were responsible for all the points of entry to the ocean and the river.
I wondered about that when you pointed out the landing launch pad, I guess, since it's not an official landing, next to the harbor master's
Right.
office.
So there's
We got a
there's
landing here that you
basically-
can't land, and we got one there.
And
that-
basically, kind of in my experience on the beach committee and with Beach Ave and the Nubble, in general, people in the other part of town administration are not paying a lot of active attention to some of these other public spots. That there's a spot on Cadman's Neck that somebody, one of the abutters, planted a very large tree on 20 years ago, and now it's a really big tree. But that is actually a landing that belongs to the people of Cadman's Neck, perhaps just the abutters, but no more. And these have disappeared all over town, and kind of nobody's actively paying attention to it, except I will say, to his credit, Chris Gonzalez, the highway department, when I brought some things to his attention, and sometimes somebody else has, he will see that someone's building a garage onto a paper street that accesses a pond that potentially the fire department will back down to fill their pumper truck on. And he will, on his own, go down and have a little talk with the person. So it's not clear who's in charge of this, generally. And it's not clear to me, I mean, we're certainly not tooled up at the moment or funded to do this for the town, but kind of nobody's doing it. I don't feel like the Marine Services Director's been real involved. He's going to have to be involved with Uxbridge, and I'm happy to consult him on this, but his time is sort of split between shellfish and other stuff. So I think that the town needs to, and the select board need to have some administrative talk about what's our role and what's their role, and is anybody watching the store, sort of. Because every one of our landings before my time has been encroached. We've had to take action against the abutters, every one of them. And we're sort of paying attention compared to other parts of town.
So you're gonna bring that to their attention tonight, or you think they're just gonna
I
talk
think there
about
needs to be a further conversation with them about that, and the town just needs to think about it in terms of managing the town's resources. That it was sort of okay when it was sort of just the neighborhood using these points of land, but now there's people coming from all over. And by law, anyone can access the river or the ocean, anyone on the globe, from any public road that leads into the water. Anyone cannot park there necessarily. So it needs to be thought through a little bit.
Rhode Island has a state database. Rhode Island has a state database, and it outlines if you can park there or if you can just launch there, what the access is. It's always got a couple pictures with it, and it's nice. It's set up. The whole state has that. It's pretty nice
Yep.
setup.
Lease review.
So you're going to do
Yes, I will.
vote to support this plan?
Oh, that would be an idea.
Okay. Because you're gonna go to the select board,
Yes.
I think probably that would be a good idea. I motion that we tell the selectmen that this plan that you've drawn is approximately, what our idea is right now. We think this would be a plan that would be functional. Subject to the review of planning and whoever else needs to, the select board.
It's actually not the select board. This is our land. That's one of the points I'm making here. This is our land. I think that's,
With no place to land a vote.
well, but it is our land. We know this
So
one's
our land
ours.
ends at this abutment, and who owns the little piece that's between the end of our land and the water? Who owns this little piece at the end of the parking spaces that we?
Oh, the abutment? That belongs to the town. The town, from my research, we abandoned the bridge. We never abandoned the abutment. And in support of that concept, because Al Lees and the Hayneses have tried to say, no, it reverted back to us when you stopped using it,
As
town,
abutters.
and we own halfway to the center.
That's
And
not a private road.
Yeah.
A private road you do, but a public
And
road, I don't think so.
the bridge abutment on the back eddy side, there's a legal agreement between the town and the back eddy to use that property. They don't pay the town anything, but there is a legal agreement that says this don't belong to you, this belongs to us, and we're letting you use it. Yeah. So,
Could we really?
okay, did we vote? Did we
Too
vote?
much time.
Did
We didn't.
vote? Okay.
I second.
It has been all in favor of the.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Moving rapidly along to lease review. As I explained, my computer failed, and so I have for you this spreadsheet. Copies of the leases, and I'm embarrassed to say that the copy I was able to print of the lease for our current year, let's see how good I am with paper, doesn't have the amounts filled in. But I was able to quickly ask our very competent town bookkeeper to look that up. So you may fill that in on your... Do I only have one copy of that spreadsheet? How can that be? Oh, I know why.
It's on the copy of the copier.
I didn't have that one in this copy.
Yeah, I was a little concerned where they were gonna put that canoe, but, I think that's a good location for it.
Yeah.
It's not in the way, it's not taking up space, where people might be playing frisbee or something,
Right.
and, yeah, and has a little bit of oversight, more oversight. It's rain blowing.
Going
2
to
weeks?
the
2 weeks?
4th.
Busting.
Actually, the 4th we go into Boston, stay overnight, and then we leave the 5th.
This is still going to be recorded. I have to get to another meeting. So, yes, you guys.
So for 2022, your column, so you might want to write above the word Atterbury, they paid $35.70. And above the word kayak, they paid $15.80.
1580.
Yes.
For the whole year.
Yes. Now, what I see, I have some confusing numbers here. Oh, I'm sorry. It was probably Atterbury was probably 3310. I think the watershed is 3570. So, as you can see, there was no change from 2020 to 2021 because we were so late getting the leases out. It seemed like, I mean, the lease year had already begun. So legally, if someone had wanted to push the issue, you can't raise someone's rent if you didn't give them 30 days notice. So I know Sue Brayton said she would look into this a little bit. I don't think we're necessarily tooled up to make this decision tonight. I wanted you to have those numbers because in the last 4 years, the assessors have started charging Atterbury and the kayak shop monies that they did not previously charge them. And I think in fairness to them, that needs to be considered.
Yeah, we should, I think,
Also,
have those numbers to
Atterbury
consideration.
is asking for a 5-year lease. I don't know. I mean, you had said that Atterbury had a real what I'm going to call a real septic system that will not need to be upgraded because it doesn't include a cesspool. Is that correct?
Under Westport's current regulations, that's probably correct, but not necessarily under these proposed.
That may come down the pike.
Right.
Right. So
That all of us might be faced with.
Right. So I have some concern, even though there's a clause in our lease that says we take no responsibility for your septic system that's on our land. I'm a little concerned if the town ended up being subject to those unlikely regulations, what's our responsibility to them, to Atterbury, to spend God knows how many thousands of dollars to rebuild their septic system?
Well, if this kind of rent, I would consider abandoning the house if that was the case,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
So,
Right.
yeah.
So anyhow, this is what the history has been. I'm glad you have a copy.
Yeah, so, yeah, if we could get those other numbers from Susan about what they're
Right,
paying,
I
what
will.
the history of what the taxes has been.
And I will need to be back in touch with Ms. Atterbury because she wanted the name changed on the lease to her name because I expect she's fully divorced by now. And then for us to consider...
For this next lease.
Yeah, for her to consider whether she really wants a 5-year lease. And then for us to consider if we do a 5-year one, do we want to do some estimate of what it would have been worth year to year to year? And then, in other words, if we decide that the property 5 years from now is going to be $4,000 instead of $3,300, do we want to just go up incrementally and set those amounts, or do we want to add up the total, divide by 5, and say you now owe us $3,800 every year for the next 5 years? I mean, there'll be that decision to be made also.
Well, the house will be wet before the septic system, so.
All right. The head slipway railing. I have went down for the head when it got the coldest recently, and there was almost no ice on the river there. And the water is fast moving there enough that it's occurred to me that if the Eagle Scout, who I've not heard from, is still going to make us a railing, they had talked about the idea of putting in a sleeve with a cap. That seems like a problem to me. I would rather maybe if this is the railing and this is the river, that they make this bottom section of this railing potentially removable, so that if ice ever did come here, it wouldn't lift up on that. It would just be sliding up and down the pole, And potentially we could even put like a plastic sleeve over the pole for the winter so that the ice couldn't actually grab onto the metal. Because I just, what if we have to like vacuum out that whole, if the ice lifts
Is
the
that our
cap off?
responsibility to maintain it, probably?
What? I don't think the Eagle Scout's going to come back and do that. So my sense is to look at a more permanent installation, that have them dig way down, put cement down at the bottom, and maybe make this thing removable. I asked the engineer who's doing Hicks Bridge whether he had any experience with this. I sent him the photograph. He said he knew nothing. But I think with global warming and everything else, unless there's really a change here, I don't think we're going to have a big ice problem there.
Yeah, we haven't had good solid ice there for at least 5 years, but we did before that. But yeah, I think you might be right. But I think the plastic sleeve, that's what they're using for winter moorings over in Dartmouth, is a PVC tube that the ice
really?
can just slide on pretty well. Yeah, it's kind of a neat little design that you're using. So yeah, I think maybe just the plastic sleeve.
That seems adequate to me.
And it's not going to be like thick rail, right? It's going to be rail
Yeah.
that you can hold on to. Yeah, probably
Right.
1 inch or 1.5 inches.
Whatever
or
the
something.
standard is, yeah.
Yeah.
Basically, what I was going to ask somebody from the Disability Commission, who's a little bit disabled, the guy that does the road cleanup for the town, Martin Costa. I'm going to get him, going to get some plastic kayak, take it over to the watershed, because they have those kind of railings that it would look like for their ramps. And I'm going to have him sit in a kayak on that and say, okay, see if you can pull yourself up out of the boat here. See how it works for him. That's my thought.
Yep.
Minutes approval. Have you sent us any minutes recently?
Yeah, pretty shortly after the last meeting. Did you
Okay.
see them? You remember? No. Pretty shortly after. I'll send them again.
I don't remember.
Okay.
seeing
Okay.
All right, we'll take
Send them
that.
again.
Does anyone have other business not anticipated at time of posting?
it. No.
I do not.
Well, I would like to applaud us in getting a lot covered today.
It's only 10 to 6. Next meeting date, though. That might take a long time.
Well, because, I mean, hopefully we will have somebody from the engineering company here for that.
So it'd be good to set it so you can contact him and say, hey, can
Yeah.
you be at our meeting on the
Yeah.
whatever. The 21st would be 4 weeks. Are you back by the 21st, Brian? When are you back?
I'm back on the 19th.
So would the 21st work for you?
Yeah. As of right now.
It's 4:30 on the 21st. Is that good for people?
Yep.
Okay. And I've got to applaud myself for actually doing the posting on time. And I'm going to put a note in my calendar right now.
What do you, so you need to post that by the Thursday
Post
before?
next week's landing meeting.
Next month.
Well, I did it for March 14th. I have to tell myself on the week I should do it to do it. Telling myself right now doesn't help. Oh, and now the public knows that I only have an elder brain. All right, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
6:52.
Here is a copy. All in favor?
I
Okay.